Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by Tucker Hazel, and we're here today to talk about a video game. But before we talk about it, before we get into the nitty-gritty and the details of today's topic, join our Discord, like the video,
Yep.
subscribe. All of those things happen to be in the same general area, which is the description. Go root around down there. Tucker, it's finally time to bury the hatchet and look towards the future.
Okay. All right.
Because today, Tucker, we were talking about, as the title and the thumbnail would imply, we were talking about Arms 2. We're going to do a little bit of speculation about this game that doesn't exist. Because historically, as fans of BLB will not know, because this was prior to us actually starting the channel, we have very split opinions on Arms.
Yeah.
Tucker has played over 100 hours and thinks it's one of the best games on Switch.
Easily.
I thought it was a ginormous disappointment. But that doesn't mean I hate the game, not by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's got great world design, great characters, great music, and solid gameplay that just ended up going nowhere for me.
Mm-hmm.
So today, I think, Tucker, we're gonna talk a little bit about Arms. We're gonna talk a little bit about how great an Arms 2 could be, what we might want it to have, and more importantly, why this game should exist. Because Arms deserves to be talked about more. I say begrudgingly, as not an Arms enjoyer, but as somebody who could see a potential universe in which I really like an Arms 2.
I think the thing is, and what this is unifying, burying the hatchet, all of those phrases, is just that Arms, regardless of the success of the first game, your opinions on it has potential. And the idea of discussing a sequel is just ideas flowing left and right and possibility oozing out of every possible orifice. It's nasty, it's gross, but it could turn into something beautiful.
I'm just gonna pretend you didn't say any of that, and here's what I'm gonna say instead, Tucker. Arms sold, I believe, about 2 million copies.
Sure, I'll go receive updated sales figures.
Sounds good. I don't think Nintendo has released sales figures for Arms in a while.
I'm just curious.
I think 2 million is the last we heard, which is pretty solid, especially for launching in June of 2017, before Nintendo pretended it no longer existed.
Yeah,
I think
2.38 million.
2.38.
Yeah,
solid new IP.
Yeah. More than any Pikmin game.
More than any Pikmin game.
When
you start playing the comparative analytics games, it gets a little bit muddy. But the fact is, I think there is enough success behind Arms, especially for being, 3 months into Switch's lifespan, for a sequel to grow out of that. And we haven't heard a whole lot. We had some updates that slowly added in content that should have been in the base game.
Mm-hmm.
And then the announcement of a graphic novel that got canceled without any kind of news. So Arms is not in a particularly strong position, but I think the fact that we got Min Min and Smash Brothers, there's kind of this groundswell around the franchise, there's, this sales success, I think there is room for a very well-deserved and needed Arms sequel.
Yeah, because I think that Arms had, again, going back to the potential, but it's the potential that the base set. The game is very unique in its conception. It has Nintendo charm everywhere, all over it, and I don't think that anything in terms of the fundamentals of what the game has to offer in its design or its characters or its visuals or any of that are what people complain about. Unfortunately, it's the package that grabbed the hardcore player base but alienated others. And really, adding content to a fighting game is not particularly complex when you look at how bare bones the original was.
Yeah, I agree completely. I was actually writing about a hypothetical Pokken Tournament 2 over at CBR, and I was kind of drawing a parallel between these games because I think they're in a very similar position where their problems aren't fundamental gameplay issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lack of variety, it's lack of content, which is easily rectified in a sequel, And I think that a lot of problems with Arms, I think that if Arms had launched like in 2020, it would have been a much different game than 2017.
Sure.
Not only because, 3 more years of development, but because Arms really was a victim of the Switch obviously launching before it was ready, because Nintendo needed to jump ship from the Wii U, which was completely underwater by the time they launched the system. They needed something to get out. And it was also in that phase where Nintendo was pretty content releasing a game like Kirby Star Allies or Mario Tennis Aces or Arms where we're going to give you half of the game and we're going to attempt to apply the Splatoon model to
Yeah.
everything.
Mhm.
Post-launch updates, but the cadence wasn't right for ARMS. There wasn't enough content, I think, on the cartridge in the first
Yeah.
place. So by the time that the narrative started to change on the game, it was just way too late. I think Nintendo started to learn from that a little bit more. I don't think we've had so many feature incomplete releases in the later
Yeah.
years of the Switch. I
Can't
mean,
really think
less
of any.
releases in general, but less feature
Sure.
incomplete ones.
Yeah.
So I just think that in the current context, ARMS would have a much better chance of actually surviving and being a cohesive and coherent package.
Yeah, and I think it's also a victim of launching early with the Switch and being something very strange. Like it was, I remember getting the game at launch because I was in my mood where I was going to buy every new Switch game coming out, and I did for about the first year of the Switch. And still at that launch, not exactly knowing, you know, what else going to be in there, what's the post launch support really going to look
Yeah,
like, being confused about it, and even to the point where I had I mean, I personally do, but I had friends who were like, well, do you have to play with motion controls? Because in its reveal trailer it was all motion controls, nothing,
yeah,
no word of button controls, and I just don't think Nintendo properly pushed it. It had a lot of interesting pre-launch coverage. I think the format of the directs, having Biff being narrated by Biff and having this sort of theme of, okay, we're talking about these fighters that are coming up from all around the world. They themed it really interestingly and covered it in a different way that was fun to get into. But if you weren't excited for ARMS, you kind of, and I had friends who did this, you just turn off your brain because like, oh, another ARMS thing. But I think with what they've set up, with the way that they talked about the game pre-launch, now people know what it is, at least relative to when it before it launched. A sequel could carry some really interesting momentum, I think, for a game that did do well for a new IP, all things considered.
yeah. ARMS just has to untangle itself from early launch jitters of being revealed in January as a showcase for Joy-Con and
Yeah.
being kind of positioned that way, because ARMS is way better without a controller. I think with a center controller is way better.
Yes.
I think that, especially in a Switch Lite ecosystem, you say, okay, here is ARMS, and ARMS 2 is just a really solid, content-rich, interesting fighting game. It's
Mhm.
not a gimmick to sell the
Yeah.
controller. It's not some kind of weird in-universe marketing shtick that gets tired when people are not really interested. I think that you get rid of all of the fucking nonsense that settled the game down. And honestly, Tucker, you just add some more modes, you add some more variety, you make those fun, like the basketball mode and the volleyball mode, give them some actual weight,
Yeah.
make it. I think more than Smash Brothers, even as much as Sakurai says Smash Brothers is a party game, it's not. And I think he's even coming around on that
Yeah.
way he'll talk in the presentations. I think you make
Calling
ARMS
it the
too.
best-selling fighting game of all time. He's like, oh,
Yeah.
wait, I'm not supposed to say that. He's a silly
I,
man.
he's a very silly man, but
So
I
is
think what.
Yabuki. I like Yabuki.
Yes. And
Arms
Yabuki needs to
director.
double down on this just being a party game.
Mhm.
Give it online multiplayer people can play, give it a ranked ladder mode, but make it about fun items and fun modes and fun characters.
Yeah.
And I think positioning it that way would make it a really valuable addition to the Switch's library when fighting games on Switch are Smash Brothers, or maybe you're like a fucking dumb anime weeb and you have like Blaze Blue or
Mhm.
Dragon Ball or
Or
something.
I mean, but I think the point is that the Switch act. I mean, I think you're underselling the amount of fighting games that are on Switch, because not only that, but you have an insane amount of retro collections of fighting games. You got every single classic Street Fighter game. You've got all the Fatal Furies, all the King of Fighters, all of that, and Mortal Kombat 11, and Dragon Ball Fighter Z, and all of that. So, but ARMS, I think, does something unique, and I'm just going to spin this off into something a little bit
Sure.
different. Is that for me, fighting games get really old because I feel like it's so based on skill and so little in the matches that changes that I can't see myself coming back, because that's not the kind of gamer I am. I don't
Sure.
like the repetition. Smash, I think, is a little bit different because there is such a large variety of stages that you interact with differently because you're platforming. And of course, there are items and different game modes, which I think other fighting games lack. But ARMS even takes that another step further in that the entire conceit what the fuck am I thinking of?
Conceit.
Conceit of the game is customization. Is that you not only have your character, which changes the ways they play, but you have two different gloves on each hand, and you choose 3 before the match starts. There's so much customization that goes into how you play the game that if they applied that level of customization to everything in, okay, we've got all these stages, and maybe you can add stage hazards, maybe you can add these items, or mid-match something changes in the stage that really give it each match its own feel, and like you can really customize how you want to approach each kind of battle. And on top of that, adding new game modes, give us the volleyball and the basketball and other ones, but give those different courts, give them different layouts, give them items specific to that. I think there's so much potential to make it about customization that other fighting games just don't have the room for, because there's so much about precise button presses and getting your opponent's health down in that specific way.
Yeah, so I agree to an extent. I think I have to push back on the idea of ARMS having more customization than these other games because, I mean, fighting games are about raising your skill ceiling. I think part of ARMS's problem for me personally was that it felt like, okay, I'm gonna pick my arms, I'm just gonna fucking throw out my punches, and that's the gameplay.
Sure.
I honestly don't think that ARMS has a lot of competitive viability,
No.
which I
Yeah.
don't think is important. I think what is important is what you're talking about in the second half, what you mentioned, which was adding more variety to these other modes and ideas that lets you customize your experience, not in terms of like gameplay style, in terms of strategic nuance, but in terms of how can we use these mechanics in fun and new ways. I think that's where an ARMS 2 could really shine. Because my point about Smash Bros. Being the dominant fighting game is that's what everyone talks about. You got all of these other games, but they're relatively unimportant. Even something like a Mortal Kombat or Fighters are played on different platforms. You know,
Yeah.
I think what's great about Smash Brothers is Nintendo dominates that in the platform fighter space, not only because that game's so mechanically rich, but because it has that Nintendo polish to it and flair. I think ARMS could have an equal amount of Nintendo polish and flair, but in the more wacky, experimental, almost
Yeah.
casual, but not in the bad sense of the word appeal. You know, this does not need to go to the Evo circuit, right? It just
No.
needs to be a fun multiplayer game that you can play with friends. And I think
Yeah.
accomplish that is just by making it a casual party game. And I think
Yeah.
that there's nothing wrong with that.
And I think it's the leaning into the nothing wrong with that I was maybe sort
Yeah.
of, that's what I was trying to imply with the variety of the customization, is because no, yeah, the arms don't, they're not competitively different in the way. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe they are for the higher skill level players, but in the fact that it does change how you play, and you can choose ones that you like. Like, oh yeah, I want to be able to do this effect, or combine it with the other one, or change in between matches. That variety lends itself very well to it being a more of a party game. Is you're just messing
Yeah.
around, you're just having a good time, you're just experimenting with these things that do silly effects, and maybe don't have a ton of depth to them. But if you again apply that to everything, it would give a lot of cohesion that I think could be really fun and super different from what other fighting games are doing. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the best thing to do might be to give arms to a different team. I think someone like a Next Level Games could do awesome work with arms, especially now that they're purchased. You look at something like Punch Out on Wii. You look at what they've been able to do with these various Strikers games or whatever.
Sure.
I think giving a different team arms and giving them the ability to take it in that different direction, I think would be so helpful. I think the original arms is just in a space between spaces in terms of its identity for so many different reasons. And a different studio, I think, could really clarify that because the Switch, I really feel, needs more multiplayer pick up and play Nintendo titles. We've got a solid core of them, but it's a lot of pretty familiar stuff. I think actually Mario Tennis Aces is one of the most fresh local multiplayer games in the system because it offers something different and deep by the time all of its post-launch content came out.
Sure.
So I think an ARMS 2 could exist kind of in like the Mario sports games type of space if it was executed on properly.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, at least for me, a lot of the draw of ARMS is its unique concept, its roster of characters, and the world that they built out pretty poorly in terms of its execution, but really interestingly in terms of what was there. You've got this framing of this world where people get powers and there's scientists working in the background. And if you get all of the concept art, you can see these characters interacting and they've all got really unique personalities, and the unlockables feed into that. And I think there's a lot of potential for a campaign mode for ARMS that tells a little bit of a story, and you've got Headlock, and you've got Dr. Coyle, and you've got Max Brass, and there really is an interesting world here with fun characters that could be turned into something really cool. I think they proved with the Min Min reveal trailer is this works amazingly as cutscenes. They're just so fluid.
Sure.
Apply that sort of comic booky style to it to give it a really poppy, fresh look, and make the campaign something fun to play through that gets you connected to these characters, that gives them a little more personality. And I mean, that would just be absolutely perfect for me, especially with the expansion that a sequel could provide to the groundwork that they gave with the original, which in some ways is comparative to what they did with the story in Overwatch, which it's not in the game. There's not a campaign, but you've got this really interesting cast of characters with a fascinating world and history and interactions between them. And hopefully, Jeff Kaplan leaving Overwatch 2, we don't know what's going on, but
He's making
oh,
arms.
holy shit. But hopefully Overwatch 2 does what I want from, or what we see from Overwatch 2 at the moment is playing into that, is giving us this campaign, is reframing the game around these new game modes. And if ARMS follows that trend, or in the footsteps of Overwatch 2, I think it could really be pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I mean the number one thing I wanted of Arms too is a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's suited for that. I did not know any of that story was in there, and I don't care,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is testament to how mismanaged it was.
Sure.
But I think the Overwatch analog is pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
I think put that shit in the game,
Yeah.
and so you get rid of Arms's awful like punch out perspective. Show me a full character.
Hmm.
Give me like if I could have almost a 3D beat 'em up platformer Arms
Yeah.
single player campaign, like that would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I think combining that great single player presence with a really great local multiplayer presence would give Arms a super unique identity and make it a really great addition to the library in general.
Yeah, and honestly, reframing it through something maybe a little bit more than just, okay, this is fights. We're going to go
Yeah.
stage to stage. This is just a bracketed arena, working way to the top, which is what the I can't remember exactly what they call it, but the campaign in the original, where you would play through as each character, fight max bass. If you're doing it on a high enough level, you get a headlock, you get Dr. Coil, it goes into that. But I think that the core gameplay of shooting your fists out and customizing what's on them, and having your characters with their slightly unique abilities could work in lots of formulas. I think you could do something where there's hordes of robots coming at you, and you can deploy a shield arm, or one that has a wider spread, or something like that it changes how you approach a level, that with progression and upgrades for your arms that give them different effects and stuff like that. I think there's so much possibility in the way that you approach the core gameplay. It doesn't need to just be a one-on-one fighting game based around, in the story, a fight. I mean, I just, it just gets my wheels spinning thinking about all the stuff they could do here. I mean, they had light aspects of skins and customization in that way in the first one, but if you got character customization in this, and you can unlock skins, I mean, there's just so much you can do. That would be just so much fun to keep going back to.
Yeah, the more we talk and the more you're throwing these ideas out here, maybe Arms's core gameplay is fundamentally wrong.
Hmm.
Maybe what Arms needs to be is not just a straight fighting game.
Hmm.
Maybe it does need to be this more, single player. Here's a campaign. Here's a big world to explore. Here's all this lore to interact with. Here are these fun and varied multiplayer modes on the side. There's a fighting component here.
Yeah.
Maybe Arms is more than that. Maybe it is more of a single player adventure game with great local multiplayer modes. I think actually as we're talking, I think there's a lot of room to make an Arms 2 almost more of an Arms reboot of
Hmm.
here's these characters, here's this world. What if we can contextualize them in this different way instead?
Yeah.
I think there's merit in both. I think there's merit in the straight sequel of let's just take Arms but more,
Yeah.
but also let's take Arms and really think about what worked and just put it in a different context.
Hmm. And obviously, not a game designer, and obvious, and just to be 100% honest, I came up with that as you were talking, the idea of horde modes and stuff like that. I don't know if it really would work to reframe it
Yeah.
in that other context, just because it is so complex on how the basic mechanics of shooting out your fists and stuff works. But I think I think I'd be happy with either, which is a good sign. I think that a straight sequel with expanded side modes a little bit more in terms of unlockables, a bracketed fighting arena campaign, but one that has a little bit more of a story to it, some cutscenes, some reasons to replay it, and then fleshed out in terms of more stages, more characters, a better online, stuff like that. Although the online in ARMS pretty damn good. The
Yeah, it's
the
very
lobby system is one of my favorite lobby systems online. But I'd be very excited for that. But also, yeah, I think there's possibility for them to be more a little creative with it.
Tucker, I hope this happens. I don't know if it's going to, in all honesty.
Sure.
I think it's fairly likely that we would see them revisit ARMS.
Yeah.
To be frank, I don't know if it would be a big release. It could be a nice little late summer game. Maybe like next August we could get an ARMS sequel or something. But
Sure.
we'll see. I don't know if I have much more to add. I would like that.
Yeah, no, I've run my course on this. This is something I think about a lot. I still to this day go back and play ARMS. I introduced a couple of my friends to it a few weeks ago. I still think it holds up. I think that the post-launch support, while again, you were right in that it was stuff that should have been in the game, did really help the game. And I think continuing that into post-launch support for a sequel could continue keeping the community around it, because ARMS really does have a fantastic community. And a sequel, I think, could prove that this series does have momentum and pull in a lot of fans, because this could become a B or C tier staple Nintendo property that you see, once every 10 years or something like that. You got a new ARMS, which is really a weak series at that point. But we've got plenty of iconic Nintendo franchises that get less than that, and I think ARMS deserves to have a little bit of staying power, not be a one-off thing.
Yeah,
it was such a cool experiment.
We'll see. But Tucker, I think that's that. I think we've gone through our ARMS 2 thoughts.
Yep.
Maybe we'll come out the other side of a Nintendo E3 2021 presentation with an ARMS 2 announcement.
Give me a Mario Kart 9 trailer, a Breath of the Wild 2 trailer, and an ARMS 2 trailer in one showcase. Oh.
That's pretty powerful. That'd be
still my
pretty
beating
powerful.
heart. And a Super Mario Party 2. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. I'm in beating that drum.
All right, we'll see you guys in other videos.
Maybe.